Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex. We're going to talk a ton Falcons. Obviously, they make the biggest stunner. If you watched the show live last night, you saw a lot of our reaction, and we're basically going to be talking about that the entire show. But before we get into that, there's going to be a lot of negativity. It's really hard not to be negative about the decisions that they made. I want to start off with something positive. I just want to say it because we're not going to do a whole segment on it, but Ozzy Albies is officially back. So, yes, let's clap it up for something good and the Atlanta Braves, because they are probably the only one keeping us Atlanta sports fans sane. And there's so much to unpack about this Michael Penix thing. So let's stick with the positive, right? Let's stick with it because there's not going to be too much we can say about it positive and talk about why the Atlanta Falcons made this move. We saw Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot take a press conference around midnight last night at the end of the first round. And the things that you kept hearing consistently was Kirk Cousins is our starter. We plan on him to finish out this contract. We hope that's what happens this entire 4 years, not just the 2 years guaranteed, because that means we're playing well enough. And they looked, and then they talked about the Green Bay Packers method. They talked about the fact that they went from Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love. And yes, it sounds good, right? Yes, if everyone could be the Green Bay Packers, we would all love that. We do not want to go through what we just went through in quarterback purgatory. There's just so many deficiencies in it. But let's stick with the positive. That's the positives. That is the plan. And if it works out in that manner, and Michael Penix is really good, and Kirk Cousins is good for 2 to 3 years, and maybe you realize Penix is the guy, and you trade Cousins after 2 years, whatever it is, there is this. It's a small runway, right? But there is this runway where this is the most perfect thing ever. Cousins delivers you playoff success. We get back to the playoffs. Maybe we win a couple games. Maybe we even win a Super Bowl. But after 2 years, you're like, Penix is ready. You trade Kirk Cousins. You get draft picks for Kirk Cousins. Penix comes in. There's no drop-off. That's the hope, right? Because that's really what the Packers method is. Not only are they getting rid of Aaron Rodgers, they're trading him for draft picks, getting rid of the entirety of the rest of his contracts, and a guy steps in and there's no beat. It's a small runway. It's a small runway. Only one organization has done that correctly. There's a reason for that, right? I guess maybe you could point to Patrick Mahomes. They did it once, but now you're talking about Michael Penix being Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I guess I'll stick with the positives and just try to. Again, everything you keep saying, there's a but. But the Falcons aren't the Packers. But the Falcons aren't perennial playoff contenders like the Packers. But the Packers ate a ton of Aaron Rodgers' salary. But they didn't maximize Jordan Love's rookie contract. But, I understand the general idea of what the Falcons are trying to do. It's very obvious, The Falcons saw what we all saw, what it could be like without a plan at quarterback, and we suffered 7-9 with Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota. It was clear that we didn't really have a plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like we still don't have a plan. It feels like we just – okay, I'm sorry. I know there's plenty of show for the negatives. I keep just going to the negatives. Positive. Michael Penix can absolutely spin the rock. The guy's got an arm. He can absolutely spin it. He's going to learn. He's going to a situation where, maybe arguably the best situation out of any of the quarterbacks. JJ McCarthy, I think, has an argument, maybe the best because he's got Justin Jefferson, an elite receiving core. Kevin O'Connell is a great head coach and offensive coordinator. Caleb Williams, I think, the Bears are trending in the right direction, but I will hold my breath. I saw Ryan Poles laughing about the Falcons taking Michael Penix. Like, buddy, what have you done as a GM? You haven't had a ton of success. You just kind of lucked into Caleb Williams. Make no mistake about it. But I think that Michael Penix learning behind Kirk Cousins with Raheem Morris, I still believe in Raheem Morris, even though I don't fully agree with this. I think that he's landing in a good situation where he's learning behind somebody. He's not going to learn behind a guy who's going to be a butthead. Kirk Cousins is going to do his job. He's not going to do things out of spite. He's a good guy. Michael Penix is going to be in a good situation to learn behind Kirk Cousins. So if you were kind of worried about, a guy learning behind a veteran, Kirk Cousins might be the perfect guy.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins, one of the things that did come out last night is that he was stunned by the decision. Now, We're going to talk about the bad sides of this. But like I said, this opening segment is going to be about the positives. I'm going to look at the good side of things. Here is something that I heard this morning that my initial reaction to him being stunned is, oh, you didn't even let your quarterback. All right, well, let's look at the other side of things. One, Kirk Cousins was paid $180 million. He was paid $100 million. He can cry on his tears of millions of dollars in his bed. You don't really owe him when you pay him that kind of money. Two, here's the thing. If you do tell Kirk Cousins before the draft that you're planning on drafting Michael Penix 8th overall, and someone hops over you and you do not get Michael Penix, now you don't have Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins is pissed at you, right? So there is this thing where, and beyond that, maybe they're upset, a leak gets out, someone jumps over you. So there is a reason why the Falcons didn't tell him that. When you initially hear that, you might be like, wow, the Falcons really screwed over another quarterback, just like we saw with Matt Ryan when they went after Deshaun Watson. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass on that, because when you think about it that way, it makes a little bit of sense. The other thing I'm going to say is I don't love Michael Penix as a prospect. I didn't love it. I've said that a million times on the show. But there's no doubt he is a tremendous passer down the field. He's one of the most accurate thing. I'm sure he wowed people without pads, kind of like Zach Wilson did. That doesn't shock me at all. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. Zach Robinson, we talked about him last night. He is a great, quarterback groomer, quarterback expert. That is what he is known for. Very high on Patrick Mahomes. If he saw something, I believe they said in 50-degree weather in Washington when they went out there, he looked like the closest thing to Matt Stafford. Now, obviously, we know they have a relationship with Matt Stafford, Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson, both from Los Angeles. So if they're really high on him, it doesn't really matter what I think. Like, I'll trust the scouts. I'll trust the people that have a lot more information and know me, that they're high on him. Do I think the process is flawed? Yes, we'll get into that. But there are some good things. And at the end of the day, he is the draft pick. We've got to be behind Michael Penix because it's not his fault. It is not his fault that he landed in this situation. I feel bad he landed in this situation. He's an older quarterback. He's probably one of the more pro-ready quarterbacks that we had in this draft class, and he's not going to step in and get it. But he does, like you said, Kirk Cousins is a good guy to leave on. He did, despite the frustration stuff, he did go out there and he called Michael Penix, congratulated him. He's going to be with them. He is a good guy that is going to help him every step of the way, no matter what. And that's, I think, the good thing that you have in Kirk Cousins, and it's going to really help Michael Penix.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins is not only, he's good at his job. Like, let's not, outside of, he's just good on the field. Michael Penix is going to learn, because there's a big difference between being a college quarterback and an NFL quarterback. As a college quarterback, it is quote unquote your job, but you're going to school. You're doing everything else other than just football, really. When in the NFL, it's football. That's all there is. And Kirk Cousins is going to be the perfect example of kind of an ideal role model of just, this is how you be a pro, Michael. This is what we do. On Mondays, film, whatever it is. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then this is what we do. He's going to get a front row seat at what it's like to be a pro. Kirk Cousins has obviously carved out a nice little career. Michael Penix has a front row seat to that. Now, in a perfect world, I'll paint a scenario. In a perfect world, Kirk Cousins plays 2 to 3 years. We go to the postseason each time. I mean, perfect world, we win 3 Super Bowls, and Kirk Cousins plays out the entirety of his contract. Without getting into the specifics, Kirk Cousins plays 2 to 3 years. Maybe we cut him or trade him, whatever you might add. Hell, maybe he plays all 4 years. The Falcons are competitive. We're picking 20 and behind. Those are the playoff spots every single year. Michael Penix is groomed. He's kind of, each preseason you start to see something a little bit more, until finally, he's ready to burst onto the scenes. Kirk Cousins rides off into the sunset, maybe with a Super Bowl, maybe not. Michael Penix takes over, and there, the Falcons, no quarterback purgatory. We were competitive for the 3 to 4 years with Kirk Cousins. Now we have another guy for the next decade. That's the thought process. Obviously, we're going to get into the negative aspects, into the how flawed this situation really is. But if, like you said, it's a very narrow runway. One wheel tips off, and this whole plane is going down. But it's a narrow runway, and if you can keep the plane on the path, we're going to be successful for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, and that's the hope. Obviously, the Matt Ryan thing is long lasting. Maybe I don't know who had the final pull the trigger thing. If it was collaborative, if Arthur Blank had final say, if Terry Fontenot had final say. I'm sure it was pretty collaborative. I had hard to imagine any one of those really had the veto button right there. If anybody, it would be Arthur Blank. But I think Arthur Blank has learned, hopefully, enough from his mistakes that meddling is not the correct answer. Even though I'm sure he was very, very involved in the entire process of picking Michael Penix. That is something that they mentioned, though. They plan to be good. They probably saw throughout this process how hard it was to move up in the draft just from 8 to 1 or 2 or 3 to get one of those other guys, even if they had Penix high. They saw how hard it was because I'm sure they had calls with the Bears, the Commanders, and the Patriots to go up and move up in the draft before they even signed Kirk Cousins. So they saw how hard it was up to even move up 5 spots, and they're thinking, oh, we're not going to pick in the top half of the draft again. At least that's the thought, the hope that Kirk Cousins can bring us to the playoffs, and we're going to be picking in the 20s. There's no way we're going to be able to move up into the draft in the future. And listen, it's almost impossible, unless you're the Green Bay Packers, to find a quarterback in the 20 to 30 range like they did with Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers, that's your franchise guy. So that's the thought process. Whether it works out, we're going to find out.